this is, that negative thought you've been having, and I just can't let you try and change yourself without a fight. So, go ahead and just turn the show off, okay? And, yeah, everything's still fine.
This is Blindsight with your host, Bill Lundgren, an AINC original podcast.
You serious?
We're not holding back truth. We're here to help you heal and become the best you possible. Here's the chair. Here's the pillow. Here's Bill.
Welcome to Blindsight. This is your host, Bill Lundgren. And Blindsight is when we talk about mental health issues, particularly as they apply to people with blindness. And the program is produced by the Audio Information Network of Colorado, which I understand there's going to be a name change, but I haven't heard what it is. So keep your ears peeled for the name change. But anyway, today we're going to have another program with our producer, Jonathan Price, to talk about. This time we want to talk about families, and particularly families as it applies to addiction and addictive behaviors. It's a pretty important subject, and I'm particularly concerned that what happens in the community of people with blindness is if someone is involved in addiction, gets abusing chemicals, there's a lot of enabling, because people would say, "Oh, if I were blind, I would get drunk too." And we want to change that kind of mindset if it's indeed involved. So, welcome, Jonathan. And do you have any thoughts about what I just said?
I got lots of thoughts. I got lots of thoughts. I got thoughts all day long. Yeah, no, it's good to be back on here. I love shooting the breeze with you. And yeah, we're going through a very interesting name change. So we don't have quite all those details yet, but yeah, jumping right into the, I guess at least the enabling aspect of addiction for children. We don't understand as parents how big of a role we play, usually until it's too late. And a lot of times when, you're a parent, you're punishing a kid most of the time for something that you have set them up to fail in. So like if my son, goes and gets a cookie out of the cookie jar and I told him he couldn't have one, but he has chocolate on his face. If I set him up and I say, "Now, did you go get a cookie out of the cookie jar?" I already know that that's a lie. If he says, "Well, no, I didn't. No, Daddy, I didn't do that." I was like, "Well, you got chocolate on your face." So now I'm more upset that he lied versus taking the cookie, when really what he was doing is a natural thing. And I mean, it's natural to lie and to, steal and all that kind of stuff. But the whole point is, if I go to him and I say, "Hey buddy, I know you took the cookie. There's chocolate on your face. I just need you to not do that anymore. Or I need you to, come ask me." Cause I would have said yes. It's in the middle of the day. We're not having dinner for a while. Of course you could have had a cookie. Sure. And, reframing some of those things. So I'm really interested to get further into this topic and really understand how these questions can be manipulated and how parents just enable their kids. It's going to be a great talk.
Well, the thing that, when we're talking about addictive behavior, now you're talking about child,
just adolescence,
not letting you know what's the truth. Right. And unfortunately, right now we're going through a thing where in Great Britain and here and elsewhere, there's some big lies which people are who've done the lying. There's questions whether there's going to be a penalty for it. So there's kind of a national thing that we're going up against. But in terms of that kind of behavior, yes, that is what kids do. And part of the thing may be, I'm not a child expert or child psychologist, but I think one of the things is in terms of rather than confronting, but say, how come you decided to tell me that you didn't get into the cookie jar, and try to see if you can help
Right.
the child get a sense of what he was trying to prevent. Because,
For sure.
we lie to prevent consequences. And I think it helps if we sometimes talk about that. Now, kids' brain development doesn't stop until they're 26. So they have a long way to go before their brain and their...
Or if you're a male, it's usually in their 50s.
If you're lucky.
Right. That's right.
My brain has not stopped developing.
No.
But the issue is that frontal cortex, that center part of the brain,
right.
is where all the sense of responsibility and consequences and all that judgment. It's the newest part developmentally, but it's also, which means that it's also the last to develop it. So when we're talking about advanced years, and why do young people do stupid things? Well, it's because their brain hasn't developed.
Right. We haven't learned those lessons yet.
Right. But I think there's also another issue, and particularly around addictive behavior, and that is that sometimes parents feel like they're the blame for what mistakes that the kids make.
Yeah.
And we play the blame game, and so you have to ask myself, well, what's the right way to work with this child? And every parent does. But when the child makes a mistake, it isn't necessarily your parenting per se. It may be that you've learned dysfunctional skills from your parents who learned dysfunctional skills from their parents, and it may go several generations. So how in the world can you blame a parent who makes a mistake for the mistake when they had training to operate in a different way? And but what you want to do, what I'm hearing you want to do, is make sure you don't pass that kind of behavior or accepting unacceptable behavior onto your children, and cut the progression of bad parenting, if you will, or unsuccessful parenting. But that's what makes things a little problematic.
Yeah, there's also two elements to this. I feel that we kind of have to look at. One is the enabling aspect of it, but then the other is either the lack of discipline from a parent to a child because of the fear of, well, if I punish my kid, they're just going to grow up to be, either abusers, or they're going to be, whatever. And you can also add to that the accountability aspect. So if you're not holding your kids accountable, or you're not holding the people you love accountable, they're just going to run amok, and they're going to do things that they shouldn't do, and they know that they shouldn't do. And so when we talk about those three things, the enabling, the accountability, and the discipline, which comes first? Where do you start?
Exactly, and that's one of the difficult things, because I'll add in another twist, and that is that children tend to take roles in the family. Yeah, and there may, if you apply rules equally, that may not be helpful, because one child may need more direction than another child. And so you have to kind of tailor. This is what makes parenting so tough, is you have to factor so many different things in the decision you make, just in terms of discipline.
When I was in second grade, I was at this school in Durango. And we had this amazing Native American cultural week where they came and they taught us a whole bunch of stuff during the week. And then at the end of the week on Friday, they had the whole field filled with teepees and weaving stations and archery stations and fire pits and all this amazing stuff that we just got to ingratiate ourselves into that culture. One of the tents that they had set up was a school tent, or like how they would teach or learn. And the thing that has always stuck with me from that point on, and it's more of a behavioral issue, which could lead to the addictive, that's where I want to start, is right. When the child would go to touch something that was hot, or they would go to do something that was either dangerous, or, if it would kill them, then they would kind of step in at that point. But the adults would allow the child to touch a hot rock or a hot pot, right, or a sharp knife, and they would learn
experience. Yeah,
exactly. And that experience way more often is a better teacher than the parent protecting them from something that happens. We have all of these helicopter parents who are trying to protect their kids from everything. And then they wonder why their kids didn't grow up to be more independent and self-sufficient.
Right.
And that's part of the reason. My mom used to tell me, and still does to this day sometimes, that if it's either spiritually damaging, if it's physically damaging, like if they're going to put themselves in actual harm or danger, like running out into the street and cars coming, or it's, what was the third one? Spiritual, physical, emotional, moral behaviors. If it's one of those three things, say yes. Say yes to experiences, say yes to life, say yes to a lot of things. If it's not one of those three issues that's coming up.
Right.
And I think we got to start there.
Yeah, absolutely. But you see, one of the things too that we have in modern day, the parents are really doing a solo. There's not a lot of extended family around. And it's that, right, you mentioned native cultures. Well, in many native cultures, yes, they have a parent, but every adult in there can parent your child. And so that yep, kids are getting the experience of different ways of thinking, and they have, they know they have to be independent, and also they have different people to go to for information that they need. Parents now, that's it. You're it. And that can be very, that's daunting for the parent, but also it gives a very narrow framework for kids to operate with.
Well, and even a few years ago, we used to believe that, when I was a kid, my parents always told me that my school teacher, was an extension of my parental unit.
Right.
And now we have so many problems in our school systems that now we can't even trust our teachers for the most part. I mean, there's a few like really, really good ones that, of course, and my kids personally have been blessed with amazing teachers so far because they are an extension of me. But we have teachers who are, Bill, this education thing is scaring the crap out of me. And I miss being able to parent as a community in that aspect. And so it's just a scary, scary thing for me.
Yeah, right now, in terms of being a parent in general is pretty scary. And one of the scariest things is you have all these people telling you, the parent, what to do.
Right.
And then you have to make some decisions, and you worry about, if you're responsible, am I doing the right thing for my child?
Yeah.
And, and when a teacher does something, you have to ask yourself, well, is that the right thing for my child? Or do I have to go to authorities and complain about that teacher because we haven't any communication? When I was a kid, my mother, of course, I was a kid and my younger sister, we were both severely hearing impaired. So my mother was very, very able to invite teachers over to the house for tea or for dinner to get to know our teachers, which is I don't think
Right.
parents are able to do that anymore. You get to know the teachers so that, the parent could, I know in my neighborhood, if I had done something wrong, my mother would have found out about it in about 20 minutes.
Oh yeah,
Even if I
absolutely.
were at the other end of town,
Yep.
because everybody knew her.
Right.
And the teachers all knew, so the teachers knew what kind of home we were coming from, and knew that they could go to my mother and say, look, this kind of behavior has to be dealt with. And so they were a united front. And we can't have that anymore, or, we aren't able to do that anymore. The problem particularly comes in when the kids are abusing, and no one's paying attention. And a lot of teachers, I'm not even sure they're aware, or they think, well, I can't do anything about it. And the kid is stoned when they come into the classroom. And that means, and there's no communication with the parent. So consequently, the kid doesn't know what's right or wrong. And so they feel like, and their own mood and so forth, they need to do something about how bad they feel. There are a lot of kids out there with depression, with anxiety, just looking at the whole thing about gun violence and what it's doing to the kid's psyche. Well, the kid's going to go find something to numb those feelings that they have. And that just encourages, plus they have they're into experimentation, and they have their peers are maybe using, and their kids and even some of the kids are selling to one another. I would hate to have a kid in school right now.
Oh, it's terrifying. It's absolutely terrifying. That's why we pulled our kids out, and that we're sending them to a classical academy. But, it's just it's a different school mindset. It's a very different, mindset. So they're very excited. The kids are out of their mind excited to be going to this new school. But anyway,
well, but the thing that really, and again, I go back to the issue. If the child is like me, severe hearing, or a child is blind, and now we're because we're mainstreaming, which has its pluses and minuses. But if they're being mainstreamed and they're being bullied by their peers and so forth, and they start using substances to ease the pain, and then if a parent feel frustrated, about the kid misbehaving, but they enable behavior they wouldn't accept in a kid that didn't have a disability, then that just compounds the problem, because they're enabling them to get into destructive behavior. But the parents may have a tendency to say, well, a kid has to be a kid, even though he or she is blind or hearing or had some other physical disability. Now, there's some physical disabilities where the kids tend not to get into substance abuse. When we're talking about hearing and blindness and so forth, that's where we tend to have higher numbers of problematic behavior. We can have that. And part of it being the enabling that goes on is not the same standard, because we feel sorry for the child.
So, Bill, what are some of the first signs to look for when a parent may feel like their kid may be having an addictive personality, or they're struggling with something?
Well, I think one of the big things is, if you know your child and there's a behavioral change in the child, a significant, in other words, a child who is very much happy and spend time with friends suddenly is not doing that. It's spending a lot of time alone. It can even, and I have to include this, addicted to social media. They're spending time away from other people. then that's a warning sign that something's going on. There's a change in behavior. That's a biggie. The other thing may be in terms of and behavioral change. If you notice the behavioral change, some kids trying to find themselves may become more belligerent. I know my stepdaughter, when she was 13, I voted for the idea of putting her in a desert island for till she's 35. But that's normal for someone, a girl, particularly at 13. Right. And, you just have to understand that. But when the behavior, if you're noticing behavior that's unusual for your child, or just, if your instinct says something's wrong here, that's the time when you're going to have to use your instinct and say, look, I need to figure out what's going on, and talk with the child, or make a decision to check with the teacher, or to say, I think my child needs to talk to somebody separate from me. And that's a very hard thing for parents to own up to.
Yeah. And, I want to point out a few things that you can specifically look for. And you've kind of already mentioned these, but in terms of like mood shifting and personality shifts, things that come to my mind are like hostility. Are they getting more angry for just random reasons? Are they unable to focus? They're either hyperactive or completely sullen and withdrawn. But then in behavior changes, one of the things that I've noticed, not in my kids specifically, but things like avoiding eye contact or slamming doors, locking doors, disappearing or hiding or like being in your room for long periods of time. Another aspect that I guess two more aspects that I would like to point out: hygiene and physical health. Yeah. So if they're not brushing their teeth, or they're not combing their hair, or you find like little burns or something on there, and we're talking more older kids now, like teenagers. If you find like burn marks, or they're coming home more bruised, or one of the big ones, oh my goodness, parents, if you see your kids wearing rubber bands around their wrists, get them some help. Talk to them about what's going on, because a lot of times kids will be trying to numb the pain because they could be cutting, they could be self-damaging themselves or self-harming. And that is a method that a lot of kids are using to kind of numb that pain initially. And I've seen that so many times, especially in school, and where they'll just be like plucking at their wristband, and then eventually that wristband will snap. And, it's, please pay attention to your kids. Please just ask them what they're doing. Ask them how they're doing. And if you can extend your grace, one of the best things to overcome these initial addictive behaviors is to show unyielding grace and love to your kids. Right. You've got to be patient enough to open up your heart so that your kids can see you as a safe place to come, regardless of what they're going through.
There's a thing right now, is that since we have two career families or a single parent, it is so difficult to be able to do that. It becomes very scary, particularly if you're a single parent. It's very scary. You're almost afraid to check something out because you have to do something then. And your kid may be in trouble.
You have to invade the privacy.
Right. And you have to be able to, and hopefully you do it real early, to know that the kids can always come to you with something that's on their mind. And that has to start real early, that they won't get criticized. And part of it may be even helping them develop the frontal cortex in their brain to make logical decisions, Unfortunately, for me growing up, my mother always had the answer. And, if your mother, and she was very intelligent, but she didn't always have the right answer, of course. None of us do. Right. But it becomes a little unnerving to go to your mother and say one thing and say, oh, that's not right. And so consequently, if you find yourself doing that, it really conversation and learning conversation with your kid is so important, and allow them to tell you a little bit more than yes or no.
Right. Well, and we've always told our kids, no matter what, guys, you will never be in trouble for asking us a question. Regardless of how dumb we think it is, regardless of if it's whatever, they don't know the information. And if it's up to me as a parent, where if they don't know the information, then it's my job to help them find it, even if I don't know it.
Even if you don't know it,
my daughter came to me last week and she was like, Dad, I don't understand something. And I was like, okay, well, did you look it up? And what have you done to research this problem? She's like, well, I did this and this and this and this. I was like, great. So she looked up some YouTube videos. She did some online research. I said, if you can't figure out the problem, that's fantastic, honey. I am so glad you came to me, because now we can do this together.
Right.
And because now when she goes through, puberty, or she goes through life circumstances down the road, she's going to come to me and she's going to be like, Dad, help me. And I'll be like, absolutely. We're a team together. Now it's not a parent-child relationship, even though that's what it is. But now she sees me as a helper and a provider and a protector. And she can trust me.
And you see, one of the issues is that you gave her credit for doing her own research. And you say, great, it sounds like you did everything that you could possibly do. Now let's see if the two of us together can find some additional resources. Then it becomes that helper kind of thing. And that's what kids need. They need an affirmation of what they do right.
Right.
It used to be, and unfortunately I think it still is, we tend to focus far more on what they do wrong, because we're told by some of the child care specialists that if you praise them for something they do right, then they'll stop trying. And that's not true. And that only if the only time they get attention from you is negative behavior, guess what they're going to go for?
Right. Well, we have negative thoughts 70% of the time anyway.
Yeah.
Our thought patterns are 70% negative. So why in the world would we expect to do anything else other than to criticize our kids for doing something that they know is wrong? They may have thought about it. They may have, premeditated on whatever it is that they're doing. But when we are able to show grace and kindness and love in a helpful way, not only do they feel safe to come to you with an addiction problem, with something that's going on at school, with bullying, with abuse, with whatever it is, they're able to come to you for everything. And you can show them, you can walk with them through grace, through love, through kindness, and develop a relationship that is truly what a parent and child relationship is supposed to be. And then rather than a dictatorship, it's now a partnership, because you are trying to get your kid out of your house and become a contributing member of society, period.